Spot here. So, what I'd like to share with you today is how I use AI to build $1 million webinars in under 45 minutes without hiring expensive copywriters or farming it out to an agency where you're going to be 25 to 30 grand worse off. And what I've done here is actually create a system that I think didn't exist before. It's really a system that not only creates webinars faster, but it actually anticipates audience objections, which is a critical part, and addresses false beliefs systematically, really guides people to your offer as the next logical step. So if we think of the way that we all traditionally would create webinars, now I'm just going to, if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn my camera off there just so I can focus on the presentation, if that's all right. If we think of the way that we all present webinars, and if you've ever done this yourself, you probably know this kind of pain of going through the 6 to 8 weeks of painstaking work, deciding what you're going to teach, how much to teach, designing the slides, building the funnel, writing the campaign. At the end of all that, you kind of pray and hope that someone would actually turn up and buy something. And at the end of the day, when we're doing that, we're really just working off gut instinct. And if you've done this before yourself, it's just the way that we had to do it because it's really all there was. And it can be extremely painful, particularly if no one shows up after you've gone and done all that work. But for the first time ever, we can now create a pro-level webinar campaign in minutes that are actually based on market data. And that's the big difference. So we can validate $1 million webinar topics based on audience demand before we create a single slide. We can create, or we can know exactly what to teach. And that's another critical component, and really completely eliminate that risk of talking about stuff that really no one's interested in. We can structure the teaching content to naturally address objections and beliefs. So prospects then will see your offer as the next obvious step without needing the pushy sales tactics. And we can model the world's most profitable presentations. That's something that AI allows us to do. We can do all this still while sounding authentically you, not like the kind of cookie cutter guru templates. And of course, all of this is made possible because of AI. And you don't have to be the least bit technical. You don't have to know anything about marketing or copywriting or anything about creating webinars. In fact, AI allows you right from the get-go to produce the quality of webinar that you'd be paying an agency somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 to produce less than 2 years ago. So right now is a really exciting time to be building webinars, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So coming up first, I'm going to share with you how to create a complete webinar presentation, slides, scripts, offer, follow-ups, everything using AI. And I'm talking about presentations that convert well or better than you would spend 6 weeks building yourself or farm out to an agency to build for you. And this is all with the expert knowledge that's in your head, in your authentic voice. You'll see the exact process that I use to do that. Next, we're going to look at something that I call the reverse webinar method. So this is how you pick what I call a $1 million webinar topic. And this is really how you fill your event with dream clients. So most people spend months perfecting presentations, sometimes only to face empty rooms, or they get attendees that never actually buy. So I want to show you how to stop gambling on topics, on your webinar topics, and actually make sure that your webinar attracts the right people. So those ready to buy prospects that are a good fit for your offer. I'm going to show you something I call the 3 Insights teaching framework. So this is about how to structure your webinar teaching content to sell, not just to educate. And this is how you avoid overwhelming your audience with well-intentioned over-teaching, but what happens is it actually paralyzes their decision-making and tanks your conversion rates at the same time. I'm also going to show you how to create killer webinar headlines in seconds using AI. So this is tapping into proven frameworks based on thousands of top performing webinars. And finally, I'll show you how to turn one presentation into dozens of automated webinars that run like cash registers 24/7. So this is really about creating a steady stream of prospects that are already sold on your solution before they even meet you. So you're not left, justifying your services on those sales calls. Before the end, I'm going to throw in a bonus. This is what I call my webinar psychology cheat sheet. So this is one of the most important pieces of marketing data that I use in my webinar creation. It's a huge part of how I'm able to achieve very consistently up to 15% conversion on attendance, and we can talk about what that means a little bit later on. But this underpinning is really what makes that happen. And we've always done a version of this, but it was a painstaking process to do. Copywriters do this too, and it's really about dissecting what makes your prospect tick. And I'll share that as a download at the end there. So very quickly, who am I? If we haven't met, my name's John Hubbard. I work as a fractional CMO and AI systems specialist. I work with a handful of private clients at any one time. Over the past 23 years, I've worked on marketing campaigns for brands like Nike and Ford and Oakley and BHP. The last 13 years, I've been working with coaching organizations and SaaS founders in particular. And I've really been obsessed with webinars because I found really they were our highest leverage point. So I've studied every top expert. I've dissected presentations to a minute degree and really looked at the psychology behind what makes attendees buy. I've personally invested over 50K of my own money in agencies and copywriters, not just to build the campaigns, but also to understand the little intricate section by section tradecraft and mechanics that goes into achieving high converting webinars. I've built over 100 webinars so far and counting. I've actually lost count. And before now, that was all built very manually and slow. Now, of course, I'm able to do that with AI and put all those foundational and once I've put all those foundational elements in place for a given webinar, I can then spin up a new webinar on this selling the same product in under 45 minutes, and that can be to a completely different niche or a completely different angle or whatever. So that's really the advantage of doing this foundational work, is you can just spin up very, very high quality webinars very, very quickly. So why webinars? Why am I obsessed with webinars? Well, as far as I'm concerned, webinars are still the gold standard for converting strangers into clients at scale. And there's really no other conversion tool on the planet that does a better job of generating high quality leads at scale. And I'm not alone in thinking that. Sorry, I've skipped a couple of slides there. 73% of B2B marketers say webinars are the single best way to generate high quality leads. The engagement is unmatched too, which is why they are high quality leads. So the average watch time for webinars is 56 minutes. So try getting someone to engage with a Facebook post for 56 minutes. That's never going to happen. And because they're super high engagement, they educate and they build trust and they pre-qualify, and that all happens in that single interaction. And there's very few other methods or conversion tools that can do that. And 91% of B2B professionals consider webinars to be unmatched in establishing thought leadership. And perhaps most importantly, they're repeatable. So one presentation can be turned into an evergreen asset that keeps on working long after the live session ends. And that turns into an automated sales call that can be directing people from all your other marketing activities. And it can be used across your socials, your emails, your website, ads, all of those things. And right now, they are having a huge resurgence. So you've probably seen this in your social media feeds. All the gurus are out at the moment running webinars, people like Russell Brunson and Dan Henry and Tony Robbins. So webinars are back in a big way, but actually the truth is they never really left. Even with the big trend of these community funnels and so on that's happening at the moment, the conversion tool that's been used in the back end is always webinars. So you think of those communities, free or low ticket communities, the conversion tool is typically webinars that's bringing those buyers up to mid ticket and high ticket customers. You saw there the global market's set to reach 4.79 billion by 2030. So why isn't everyone using webinars? If they're so good, why isn't everyone using them? So here's an interesting stat that I came across. 83% of marketers say webinars are effective, but only 41% have actually hosted a webinar. So we all know they're good, it seems, but we're just not doing them. So why is that? Well, I think there's a few reasons. Number one is they take too long and cost too much. So top of the list, I think this is still a very common perception among business owners that sales webinars are very difficult and time consuming to create, take a lot of bandwidth, tie up your team, or alternatively, you go down the agency route and you're going to be 20 to 30K worse off, and there's no guarantee that will convert. So time and money to build. I think that's a completely understandable objection, but it has gone away because now we can build webinars with AI which are super fast to create. We can create them to a very high standard based on our own expertise, and that really removes that barrier of entry and opens up a lots of new opportunities to drive revenue. The other thing that I think holds people back is the kind of guru templates. A lot of people have tried webinars or perhaps dipped their toe in the water. They've used some of these templates. They felt inauthentic or incongruent with the way that they like to present to their community or the value that they like to give their community. And I get that no one wants to come across as inauthentic and feel like an idiot just to get sales. And some of those scarcity tactics are truly cringeworthy. But I think the reality is that's also gone too, because with AI, we can create content based on your unique expertise in your authentic voice. So there's really no hard sell needed when it comes time to offer your product, because instead we can have a well-engineered webinar script that focuses on the unique benefits of your methodology throughout the presentation. And when we get to your offer, it really feels like the next natural step. So rather than a clunky sales pitch. The other thing that I think holds people back is they just don't feel that webinars can work in their industry. And I've heard this in lots of different directions, that they only work for certain industries, that they work for internet marketers or coaches or course creators or SaaS founders. And, I hear things like my industry is different. My audience is too time poor. They're too sophisticated, too skeptical, too analytical, too whatever it is. The reality is the data tells a different story. Webinars are used across all sorts of industries. My clients across all sorts of industries, from service businesses to SaaS companies to solar to traditional coaching companies. So they work across all sorts of industries. And as you saw with engagement, people will spend the time if you pick the topic right. So the first thing that I'd like to share with you together is how I use the reverse webinar method to pack my webinars with dream clients. So we all know that most people spend months creating the webinar content. We also know that 63% of small and mid-sized businesses say that driving registrations is their biggest webinar challenge. And I think this is a challenge because they use what I would call an inside out approach. So they look at the webinar content from the perspective of what's their expertise? What would they like to talk about within their expertise? What do they deliver? What's their product? And it's kind of what I call here's what I do, here's what I'll teach. And so that's really inside out. It's starting with them and it's pushing outwards towards the audience. And of course, what can happen here is you're spending all that time and no one actually shows up. And then you've got months of work that are literally down the drain. And what I see happens then is often this cycle of false attribution of failure that people go into, as webinars don't work, or you wonder if people actually want what you're selling, or you start second guessing your own expertise, when in fact, none of that had anything to do with your skills. The problem was really your starting point. So the real key to a successful webinar is validating demand for your topic before you create it. And that's actually really easy to do these days, particularly with the use of AI. So we build the webinar in reverse. So step one is really critical. We're going to validate demand before we create the webinar. So job one, find out what your market wants and give it to them. So if you were doing SEO for your website, you wouldn't start writing hundreds of blog posts straight out of the gate without doing keyword research first. It's exactly the same principle when you're creating a webinar. You don't just pick a topic off the top of your head. You find out the data and what people are actually interested in. And so this is a really fundamental shift. So this is what's called outside in. So we're looking at what the market wants and then we're delivering it to them. So find out what the market wants and give it to them. Now, this is a really simple thing to do. You can do this right now if you like. If you go on to YouTube, and if you want to find out what your market is looking for, and let's say you're selling consulting, coaching or business coaching, if you type in how to consulting and then go up to filters there and then filter by view count, you can very quickly find the most popular topic framings within your niche or within your topic. And you can start to look at how you might use that information to then choose the angle or what we call the framing for your webinar. So I'm just going to stop share for a second and reshare, make sure I've got my sound on here. I just want to show you, illustrate how important framing is here. So there we go. Allow. Okay. If sing out if the audio doesn't come through on this, but I just want to show you this video quickly. So if you go to YouTube and you put in the topic of the webinar that you're thinking about using, then if you go up to your top right-hand corner there and click filters, if you scroll down to view count, what we're going to be able to do here is sort this list of videos from most popular to least popular. It's going to sort via video views. Now, what you want to do here is just go through these videos, skip the sponsored ones because they're skewing the results. But what I'm looking for is patterns here in what's coming up. And one of the patterns that I can see coming up already is how to start a consulting business. And as you scroll through, you'll see more of these patterns come up. And we can start to actually identify these framing types, and then we can categorize these framing types. So here's one I prepared earlier. So business coach. The framing type is how to start a consulting business. So if you think of this topic of consulting, it's a really wide topic, right? There's lots of different angles into it. So clearly what people are searching for here is they're searching for entrepreneurial guidance on how to launch their own practice or consulting business. And we've got things like how to start a consulting business from scratch, how to start an LLC for a consulting business, and how to start a consulting firm in 2025. We've also got how to break into type consulting. So an example would be how to break into management consulting. And what that tells us is there's people out there, they're looking for information specifically around that vertical or niche. The other framing type that came up and was quite prevalent was how to succeed or excel in consulting. So how to succeed at management consulting, how to excel in complete roadmap for MBB. I don't know even what that means, but I'm sure someone in this niche would know. And then next we've got how to price or structure consulting services. So there was a whole other category of framing that fell into this price/structure of services. So what gets really interesting here is as you start to look at this topic framing and you start to look at the views, we can do a bit of a popularity contest because, you wouldn't want to go with the least popular framing. Why not go with the most popular framing? And if we take that a step further, what we can do is we can look at the performance by framing type. So you can see there that starting a consulting business is quite a bit up. It's over 100,000 just based on our small sample set there. And exceed or excel in consulting was actually the lowest. It's 3 times less popular than the highest one, which is start a consulting business. I would be leaning towards doing a webinar around starting a consulting business, assuming that they're part of your ideal client avatar. So that's the first step. Find out what the audience wants and give it to them. So if you go, So that's the first part of doing the webinar in reverse. It's finding out what the audience is looking for in and around your topic, what the framing type is, and then really trying to meet them where they are at the moment. So rather than suffering from that expert's curse, starting from the outside in and working out what the topic is. As soon as we've got the topic worked out, we can create the landing page or the registration page. So the idea with creating the registration page first is we really want to distill the core value proposition around the topic we're about to present. And what this does more than anything is it really forces you to do the work to work out if this topic is actually sellable. So it forces you to create a sellable topic. And so the actual registration page that we create around that most popular framing becomes a roadmap for the webinar content itself. Now, in the webinar content, we are actually going to give them what they need, not just what they think they want. But the way that we're going to sell the topic is we're absolutely going to enter the conversation that's going on in their head, meet them where they are, and sell them what they think they want. So when you're thinking about the registration page, the most important thing is the headline. So let me just show you some headline comparisons here. There is a huge difference in headlines, and what you see when you do this over and over again is the amount of bums on seats is directly related to how good your headline is. It contributes about 80% of the value of a registration page. So you can see a typical bland headline there on the left-hand side, and on the right you can see a headline that's much more inclined to get, even though it's still quite a simple headline, much more inclined to get a high attendance rate. Have another look at an example here. Again, same topic, but the headline and the subheadline and the pre-headline are much more attractive. There's lots of benefits in there. There's curiosity, and that will, again, attract a much higher on-page conversion. Same again. So if you were to talk about new technologies in property management versus the rise of the smart tech landlord, this was a very successful webinar that we ran. A new breed of property investors are making an extra $5,000 per property per year with zero effort, all by firing their property managers and using one-to-one prop tech in their place. This is an interesting example I saw on a call from Russell Brunson recently. He had a client that had this headline, which wasn't a bad headline, and they were doing a cost per registrant of about $24 and a show-up rate of about 22.4%, which was pretty good. They added a bunch of curiosity into the headline, and what happened after that is they brought their registration costs down from $24 to $5.84, and their show-up rate increased from 22% to 31%. So it goes to show how curiosity can be a really good play into your headlines there as well. So something to think about when you're creating your headlines. So what I'd like to do now is I'll just show you how I go about doing this with a tool that I've created to build the headlines. So what this tool is doing is in the background, it's going through and doing all of this preliminary work. It does a bunch of short lists of headlines. And then after that, it does a check where it goes back and does a final list of 10 headlines. And we do headlines typically around how to, around benefit, so benefit-led headlines, and then around curiosity. So if I look at, if I look at some examples here from our community, I've just had a beta group run through using this system that I've built. This gentleman is in the Google review space, so how to get more 5-star reviews. All the bullets and everything are created by the AI tools as well. 3 simple art therapy exercises for stress relief. So this, again, was a very successful webinar registration page for Gene. Again, Gene has no copywriting experience. This is all done with AI. And this is a lady that works with kids in the ADHD space. So a vastly superior quality copywriting to most, kind of webinar headlines you would see in this space. And we can do all that with AI. None of these people had any copywriting experience. And that really is the benefit of using AI, that we can really get to that pro level. So the takeaway is never create content that nobody wants. It's the most heartbreaking thing in the world to put all the time and energy into building a webinar only for no one to show up. So validate that topic framing first. So let the audience data decide your topic framing, and then build that registration page first. Remember that headline does 80% of the heavy lifting with the registration page. So spend your time and effort on that headline. All right, so the second thing that I'd like to talk to you about is what I call the 3 insights teaching framework. So this is about how to structure teaching content that builds beliefs and drives sales. So I guess what a lot of people, where a lot of people go wrong here, and I used to do exactly the same thing, is they deliver a lot of content with the false idea that giving more value is going to result in more sales. And as a result, I used to do exactly the same thing. I would teach too much, and it would actually kill conversions. People would say to me, fantastic webinar, I've got so much valuable information, but I get 0 sales at the end of it. And it was because I was just over teaching. I was giving them too much in an hour. And what happens is the opposite of actually what you want. So the assumption is that more value equals more sales, but what actually happens in a webinar, which is only maybe, 45 to 90 minutes at the longer end, is there's no real way that you've got a platform there for proper implementation. It's just really not feasible. So what happens is the audience they just can't keep up. So they start to drift off and they get information overload, and that turns into analysis paralysis, and a confused mind doesn't buy. So we don't want the audience switching off in that way. I learned something from Russell Brunson that really changed the way that I thought about teaching content in a webinar. He got it from a guy called Blair Warren. And it's the only job of a webinar is to introduce a new opportunity and make the audience believe it's possible for them. So I'll just repeat that. The only job of a webinar is to introduce a new opportunity and make the audience believe it's possible for them. So how do you do that? Well, I do it using something called the Epiphany principle. So the goal of the Epiphany principle is really to wow, not to how. So what we're going to do is go through a presentation. I'll show you the structured teaching approach that I use called the 3 Insights framework. So it starts with what I call the big domino. So this is one belief shifting insight that unlocks everything else. So that's the first thing that I'll teach, and the way that I work with my clients to structure their teaching content. Second one is the process themselves. So this is the mechanism of essentially the engine that sits under the product they're selling. So what's their simplified process? And the emphasis here is always on simplicity. And then the third thing is the exponential impact. So what we want to do is reveal the results of that mechanism, reveal the results of that process, and the transformative long-term outcomes that come from that. So I'll give you an example of this. This is one of the clients we've just had through a beta group that I've run. She does a program called Meditative Drawing. Now, one of the things about meditation is people find it challenging because of the monkey mind. They find it hard to switch off and get into the zone where they can meditate and actually concentrate. And so we knew that that was a big problem. And Jean had a particular approach to that, where she would do breath work first before they would go into the meditation exercises. And we said, oh, okay, well, that then is the big domino, because that's the one unlock for the audience that makes meditation possible. And we framed that as state change. So the big problem with meditation is the monkey mind. What unlocks anything is we can use this breath work exercise before we attempt the meditation, and it changes our state. And then that makes it accessible. So that's why that's the big domino for Jean. So that's the first part of the teaching content. So you can see there's a million things that Jean could have taught about meditative drawing, but by focusing on that, it's really it's talking to the audience where they are, getting them excited about the opportunity, making them believe it's possible for them. Second point is around the simplified process. So this is really the emphasis on simplicity. So you want to show the audience how simple your process is, how doable it really is. And what we want to do here is make the implementation feel really easy and achievable. So where the secret 1 is the big domino, introduces the big idea that changes everything, secret 2 really gives your audience the confidence that they can actually put this idea into practice. So this is where you break down your approach into really clear, practical milestones that really remove fear and friction and complexity. The next and the third teaching component is the exponential impact. Oops, I'll go back there for a sec. And the exponential impact is really the completion of the narrative arc. So we want to talk about, if people do your process, what happens next? What's the result of that? What are the multiplier effects of that, the second order benefits? So when you start doing this third piece of the insight, you're starting to move their thinking away from the tactical and into the transformational. And you're really helping them really now invest in their own future and seeing how things are going to work out if they apply this methodology. So they're the 3 insights: the big domino, the simplified process, and the exponential impact. And by framing by arranging your teaching content in this way, you're going to avoid that over teaching problem that occurs so much, and avoid overwhelming your audience. And also, the content is going to flow very naturally to the offer, because it is a narrative arc that we're using there. The other part that we can weave throughout our teaching content, and I mentioned this earlier in the introduction, this is really important now that we can do some of this work with AI, is the psychology of the beliefs and biases that sit within this teaching content. So automatically, when you bring up a method or a product, there's naturally objections and skepticisms that come up. We can identify what all of those are in advance, and we can incorporate that into the teaching content. And AI does a very good job of doing that. So when we write the content, we can very subtly address these points and content without saying, hey, you're an idiot for thinking this. This is actually the way it is. We can actually subtly steer people. So by the time we reach the sale part of the webinar, that all is done. And I'm going to give you this webinar cheat sheet at the end. So that's kind of the flow chart of what we're doing there. We're giving it the input of typically the webinar content. It's doing the psychological analysis. It's creating the strategic plan, and then, we're educating the audience all the way through there. Sorry, I skipped a few through. All right, so the third secret is how to turn one finished presentation into dozens of automated cash registers working 24/7. So I want to show you how you can use webinars to really have a profit center in your business that runs without you and gives you that predictable revenue and freedom to stop chasing leads and getting your time back and being able to focus on the things that you do best and all of that good stuff that we all want. The problem that I see is many people, they build a webinar, they spend all the time and get it right, and then as soon as they've won, they kind of walk off the field. They might run it a few times and then they abandon it. And all that hard work and good marketing, they just walk away from and essentially leave thousands, if not millions of dollars on the table. And that's the opposite of what I've seen really good entrepreneurs do. And what good entrepreneurs do is they get one thing working, they turn that into a system, and then they milk that for all it's worth and just milk the life out of it. And that's what you can really do with a good webinar. And it's very, very easy to turn a live presentation into a automated webinar. What we would typically do is do one or two live presentations. We would take them into a program like Descript, and we would literally just mark up the good bits of both of those webinars and just cut them together. So Descript's a video editing program. And within a couple of hours, you've got an automated webinar, which is the best of both of those webinars that can then be used everywhere. So for those who aren't familiar with the Evergreen webinar, it's really just where you click to reserve a spot, typically in 15 minutes time, or you can do it at 8 o'clock tonight. There's different configurations of it. But it runs 24/7, and we can point traffic to that from a lot of different places. So we can point to it from Facebook ads. So here's a very typical example ad that comes up in my stream quite a bit of people running Facebook, of this lady running Facebook ads to an auto webinar. Here's one that came up in my YouTube a couple of weeks back. Again, straight to an auto webinar. This is an example of a lady on Instagram, again, to an auto webinar. She's talking about around budgeting there. And then I really like the way she did the call to action line at the end here. So if you hate the idea of budgeting or want to escape the survival stage, I've made this really cool tool that can help you. And then away to the webinar. Social posts. So very easy to append something to the end of the social post. If you'd like my complete system on how to flip houses for profit, blah, 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 let me know and I'll send it over. A lot of these systems working away that work automatically with systems in the back end like ManyChat that are taking prospects off organic social posts through to auto webinars. This is one of my favorite ways of deploying auto webinars. Again, it's a very efficient way of doing it. Sometimes an alternative to a direct paid traffic as well is you're running traffic to a lead magnet, and it doesn't have to be an ebook. It's probably a bit old hat now. It can be or AI quiz or whatever it is. But at the end of that, on the thank you page, it's kind of saying, okay, you might also be interested in this masterclass. So then having that auto webinar on the page of the thank you page. Email marketing, super signatures. I love this technique. Dean Jackson came up with this, signature style masterclass. For a limited time, you can get free access to my signature style masterclass. And again, this can be on your emails going out every day of the week, sending people through to that auto webinar. So a zillion places that you can be driving people to that auto webinar, and all the time that is running in the background, pre-positioning those clients. So when they get on that call with you, they are not strangers. They've bought into the system. You've already built know, like, and trust, and it's a completely different conversation that you're having there. So I mentioned earlier that we've had a beta group come through and do a program. It's called the Push Button Webinars Accelerator Program. What I'm about to do in the next couple of weeks is run a final foundation program for this product before I kind of release it properly. So we're still early days. What I'd like to do is just show you a couple of the functions that I've built inside, which really makes that webinar creation easy. And I'll take about 5 minutes, and then we'll start to wrap up here, I think. Johan and Walt.
Yeah,
One
no
of the
problem.
things,
Pretty bad.
thanks, buddy. One of the things that we can do as soon as we've got that registration built is we can use AI to build the campaign, the promotional campaign and the reminder campaign for the webinar itself. Now, this was part of that painstaking thing when you launch a webinar campaign, there's a million jobs to do. This is one of them, and this was quite a time-consuming one. So what we can do is, once we've built the registration page, is we can come to this tool here. We can put our event headline in here. We can put our marketing bullets straight out of our registration page, and we can put in something we call the topic blueprint, which is something that we do as part of our process. So we're just going to demo that here. I'll zoom through so you can kind of see this. So we're just pulling all that stuff in. We hit go. And then what this can do is it can basically write our entire promotional campaign. Or this is the reminder sequence that's starting off. And if you're using something like Go High Level there, you can see that there's the placeholders for things like the presenter name and so on in there. But all of that can be taken straight off that webinar registration page information and a couple of other inputs that we get. And automatically we can build this campaign from scratch to a very, very high quality, because it's built on our best campaigns that we've used over the last 13 years. So that's an example of how fast we can build an entire webinar campaign. We can also do things, or email campaign. We can also do things like reminders through social media. I'll often simultaneously, when I'm doing live events, stage an event on LinkedIn at the same time. So there'll be a DM sequence that happens on LinkedIn. And then, of course, all the promotional emails can be written too. And this will take about 3 minutes or probably less. And all of your campaign to the webinar is now done. Simple. Another thing we can do is, once we've got all of that information about your offer, and we'll probably won't have time to touch on offer creation, which is another really big lever. I said the two really big levers of conversion rates are, one, the registration page and getting that topic framing right. The other really big lever is the offer itself and the configuration of the offer and how good we get that offer. That's where I spend a lot of time with my private clients, is getting that offer right. Once we've got that offer information in place, again, we can load it into the AI tool. And you can see here, there's just a bunch of offer information that's been put in there. Once we hit go with that, it can now write our webinar script. So it just literally goes through and writes our entire webinar script there, which is, in this case, this is the pitch section of the webinar. So this is where we're introducing the product. So all of that is done. What we're doing there is essentially we're taking your IP, your offer information, and then in the background, we've trained the AI on these best best webinars, so the high converting webinars. And so it's taking your information, your expert knowledge, and then it's overlaying that with these best converting webinar scripts. And then we can generate all that information for the offer very, very quickly. So that's why once we've done this foundational work once, it's very, very quick to spin up another webinar. The other thing that we do and where we get a lot of the sales in a traditional webinar campaign is in the follow-up sequence. So I recently did a campaign. It was around the $750,000 mark. Don't guarantee those results to anyone else. I've been working with this client for a long time. But we got 63% of the sales to that webinar was in the follow-up sequence. So in the email sequence in the 14 days after the sequence, this one's a 7-day sequence. So again, this is stuff that we can take what's worked in the past, and I'm a maniac for recording click-through rates and open rates and the attribution of which emails led to which sale. So over time, I've kept all of those details, and the templates that I've used to build these email sequences are based on those. So that's what we can do, is we can spin up these follow-up sequences very, very fast based on the webinar information. And again, just cuts the time down of doing this webinar creation that used to be such a handbrake in doing that. So just quickly, I'll just share with you, we've got a group coming up. What we're going to do is go through for 10 weeks together. It's what I call an accelerator program. And we're going to work on your first webinar together and get really clear on your offer, the specifics of your revenue goals. We're going to capture that expertise, which we typically do through interviews. So it's quite a fast process to do. It's not quite as painstaking as you might think. We'll do the topic validation for you. So we'll work out where the real demand is for the audience in and around your topic, doing that framing. We'll work with you to do the offer creation, which is a really important part. We haven't got time to touch on that today. And we'll also do what we call the signature messaging. So this is around what we call your 3 core message pillars. And this is how you can communicate very authentically on the webinar without kind of falling into all of that, sales speak. The other part we'll work on together is the 3-part teaching protocol around the 3 insights, how to teach your particular topic. We'll build out the whole registration system, slides, follow up, and then finally we'll load you up with an automated webinar once you've got those first couple of webinars run. So we're kicking off on the 13th of November, US time. It's Friday the 14th of November in Australia. The foundation group price is $2,500, but we're doing a special deal for the group for Johan and Walt, so it's only $2,000. So if this is something you're interested in, if you'd like to be part of this group, we've got 10 places available, and it's first come, first dressed. And there is a code on the screen there now that you can click, and you'd be most welcome to join us. So that's it from me. Walt, happy to take questions. And Johan, but 10 minutes on the clock, I think.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Sure.
So again, guys, I just want to endorse it. Johan and I went through this program, are currently enrolled in this program, and we're blown away by the outcome and the result. And Nathan posted in the script there, this goes really well with the profiler. And I responded, I don't know if you guys saw that comment, but I responded and said, it was John that helped us create the profiler. So John, as we were going through that system, you asked us like one of the best questions, and I've repeated this often in training since. You said, what does your audience need to know in order to be successful with your program? And that kind of rocked us back. We're like, oh my God. And we created the profiler tool that now is a core part of the White Label Suite program because of something that we uncovered during your workshop. And that one tool has changed the way all of our clients are using the program and then marketing the business. So again, we can't endorse highly enough the program and working with you. And in terms of the investment, you know, thinking about what does this mean for me long term? Being able to create that first webinar and then being able to create iterations of that as market changes, and to be able to create ongoing kind of angles. Like you can go after one market with an angle and then completely, change that angle as you're going forward. So, John, one of the things that I loved as we were going through the program was your pillars model and your way of helping us actually craft the offer itself. We again, ego gets in the way, right? We thought we've got the best offer ever. And then we went through your offer creation and went, oh my God, we can take it to 10x what we have been. Do you want to just talk to us about that for a moment?
Yeah, it is. I mentioned it briefly during the presentation, but it really is one of the two big levers is the offer along with the registration page, and the registration page I'm folding into getting that topic framing right as well. But what I might do is let me just I'll bring an I might just bring an example up. Well, I
Guys,
don't know
take
if
the
you can see my
yeah, keep
screen or
that
not.
keep that keep that QR code on the edge of the screen there, guys. Keep it small, mate, so they can see the QR code. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, good idea. Let me just pull up one of the offers. So this is basically one of the things that we go through together. Now, this is probably going to be hard to see here, but let's have a look here. So once we've really, sorry, he hasn't got it in his right spot. I've picked the wrong one for the offer. Don't do things on the fly, John. We go through this whole process of creating a what I call a category of one offer. And
Mm,
so this is really about if you think of the top of mind problems for your prospect, if you had 100 of your very best prospects, and we spend a lot of time identifying who the very best prospects are. If we had 100 of them lined up in front of us and we had to state kind of five problems, and the challenge was that we had to get 100 hands in the air every time we stated one of those problems, what would those five problems be? And part of that offer process is then having a matching solution to those problems. So really having a strong offer based around those top of mind problems for your clients. So I'll pull that back out there. It's an extremely important part of the process, because if you've got an offer that's completely customer centric, as opposed to what I see with a lot of webinars where they're just stacking stuff in to try and make it sound valuable, then it's a completely different conversation that's going on in the prospect's
yeah.
mind. And then also the bonuses that go with that, having a bonus that is complementary to that offer, but it's not competing with the offer. It shouldn't make the prospect feel like, oh, that really should have been part of the program. It feels like an additional thing, or it might be solving a new problem that will come from the success of the offer itself or the program itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the better you get that, guys, the better your conversion rates will be. And again, not just on webinars, but fine tuning that offer in terms of every part of your marketing, all your outreach, all your ads, everything. If you can get your offer better, you're going to do better. And that was Hermosi's first promise, obviously, with the $100 million offers. John,
Yeah,
I
and
just
a great book, fabulous book.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I know a lot of the training of your AI has been based on Hermosi's systems and structures, which is why it works so bloody well as well.
Yeah,
Actually,
and the other one, absolutely, and the other guy that really influenced me in that way was Dean Jackson, and that question around what would you give them if you only got paid if you got the result.
that
And
I
so
love
that's
that.
a kind of brainstorming process that we take people through in order to create that offer. Once we've got that offer really strong, then it's really easy to write the webinar script, because we've got really good webinar scripts that we've trained the AI on.
I love
And
it.
then the thing really sings because we've got a strong offer to start with.
Arnik said something that was really interesting. We were listening to him talk on stage in Dallas at the AI Marketing World, and he said, um, training the AI is important. He said, but this was the key piece for me, where he said, my AI is trained so well because I've only given it the winners. It doesn't know
Yeah.
how to fail, and so like having the availability of multiple people's webinars in the background of your training gives that kind of extra, like we could all go out and train our AI, but we're only training
Yes.
it on our own information. Whereas you've had the benefit and the experience of hundreds of different people's webinars and focusing on the
Mm.
winners, which just gives your AI a much better perspective. John, again, guys, you can hear how much I'm endorsing working with John. John, I just want to point out a really interesting benefit of working with you that I don't think even you realize. And
Okay.
it just triggered to me when you brought up David's thing there. So David was one of the members of our workshop team, right?
Mm.
And this was really interesting for us that David in that particular example sells solar systems, right?
Mm,
Solar panels and solar systems. And Johan and I sell software to businesses. It is a
mm,
completely different market.
mm.
What was fascinating for me in doing this as a workshop environment was that you had the perspective from your other workshop team members that actually helped you fine tune down your offer. I remember talking
Mm.
to David and going, dude, that doesn't really make sense for me. Like, I don't understand it because of this and this and this. And he went,
Mm.
oh, I speak that way because I know the industry. And he did the same for
Yeah.
us. He's like, yeah, but how does that work for, me, whatever. Having a workshop where you have people from different areas and you're all collaborating. You're all talking about, you're looking at each other's headline, you're looking at each other's offer, you're
Mm.
looking at each other's system. And by the end of it, you end up with like a much more refined product because it's not so close that you can't see it. You know what? You're getting
Mm.
that perspective from the back, which I absolutely love. So, dude, again, as I mentioned to you guys, working with John is working with a professional, and there is a cost that goes along with that. The better coach you have, the better results you get. All right. Just ask any of the top performing teams. So working with you, John, I know it's an investment for people to actually come and work with you and
Yeah.
respect from a professional's point of view. You don't go to the best in the business and expect them to give you their lunch for free. So
Yeah.
I just want to say, guys, there is a cost of working with John. But dude, thank you so much for doing the special deal with us, taking that extra dollars off, making that available to our team. What we want to do for you guys, as Johan and I always want to do, is set you up for success. So we want you to be able to take something that we work with, that we use ourselves, that we've won with, and go forth and win. If John was charging 7,500, which is his normal price, it'd still be
Mm.
worth it. But the fact that you've done that deal for us, man, is awesome. So I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. This is as I said, a foundational group. So I'm going to really work closely with people, wrap them in cotton wool. It's in my interest to get the result for you. And I will say, if you've got an existing webinar that's already doing well, bring it on, and I will guarantee, and I'll say this now on the record, I'll guarantee that we can increase the conversion rate of that webinar, or I will work for free until we increase the conversion rate of that webinar, because I think you can't not apply all of these things and and increase the conversion rate of a webinar that just doesn't have the all of these tools available to it.
I love it. I love it. Guys, thank
Hey,
you so much. Of
hey,
course, we're going to
well,
make this recording available. Go for it, Mr. Johan.
I was going to say, can I borrow the credit card, dude?
Yeah, right. Sign us up again. Yeah, sign us up again. We're there. Guys, so we're going to make this recording available. This will be up on our YouTube channel. And if you're watching this on a replay, depending on the timing, John's foundational program may well be finished. If that is the case, jump in on at whatever level, whatever price you see it at will be the cheapest that it will ever be. So, and again, guys, if you're watching this on a replay, do take action on this and jump in with John. And again, purely from Johan and I's perspective, we look at webinars as a way of conveying trust to a cold audience, being able to bring people in, get them to meet us, get them to talk to us, get them to experience us, and then put that on autopilot. It's one of the best ways ever. I used to own a webinar platform. I've done hundreds of webinars, and working through John's system is absolute gold. So, dude, again, thank you for bringing this through.
Well,
I've got
no,
my
thank you, well, and thank you, Johan, and thanks for your generous words. Well, I
Pleasure, man.
really didn't expect that, but it's very, very kind. I'm a big fan of both of you guys, and it's been a pleasure to meet and talk to your community. So thank you.
a pleasure. All right, guys, thank you so much. Go forth
See
and
you soon.
succeed. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Bring your friends. Let's all get more pie, bigger pie, share the pie, all that kind of stuff. Let's go and make some money. All right, guys, have fun. Great to see you.
Bye.
Thanks, John.
Thank
Bye.
you. See ya.